Hello everyone, Ganyu's rerun is here yet again, alongside Dendro and some exciting new characters just around the corner in 3.1. Because of this, she may not be as appealing, however Ganyu is a well-established character in the meta that's legitimately the most broken DPS in the game. In this video I will go over why Ganyu is so broken and cover how to build this insane character as a main and sub DPS, while mentioning some great new options for her and going over important things like her kit, weapons, artifacts, constellations, teams, and tips. So let's begin. Starting off with her kit is her normal attacks. The significance of her normal attacks is her charged attacks, specifically her Frostflake arrows. If Ganyu aims for 1 second, she will fire a standard charge shot, but if she aims for 2 seconds, she will fire a Frostflake arrow which deals 2 instances of damage. One is the initial hit and then the bloom damage. The damage dealt by these arrows is massive thanks to the very high scaling of the 2 shots. At crown level, both her charge shots have a combined scaling of 622%. This is quite literally a burst in charge attack form. These shots gain 20% crit rate thanks to her passive talent, Undivided Heart. And when paired with Pyro to Melt, Ganyu shots deal even greater damage which make her even more broken. The only balancing is that Ganyu is vulnerable while waiting for her Frostflake arrows, so it is best to run a shield character with her, but I'll get more into that in the team section. A great tip to remember that will actually allow you to shoot Ganyu's charge shots faster is just as Ganyu fires a Frostflake arrow, instead of continuing to aim and wait for the shot to charge up, sprint and aim. Or, just as Ganyu fires, let go of the aim button, move forward and aim again. This particular technique is a bit difficult, but it will allow you to fire her shots quite a bit faster than if you were to continue to aim. Ganyu's skill will cause her to dash backwards and leave an Ice Lotus on the field. This skill's dash is really useful for dodging incoming attacks, and the Lotus is really handy as it will taunt enemies, so Ganyu can easily attack enemies from a safe distance. The Lotus scales off of Ganyu's HP. After it's taken enough hits or its duration is complete, the Lotus will explode and deal further damage. Ganyu's burst is a large AoE attack where ice shards will continuously drop on enemies for 15 seconds. Some shards will drop randomly while some will actively target enemies. This skill is another very strong skill of Ganyu's, as these shards deal good damage on their own while also dealing AoE damage that extend to other enemies. So if a shard falls on one enemy that's close to another, both of them will take damage. This is huge when enemies are grouped up together, as each single shard will damage all enemies together. Moreover, the characters within Ganyu's burst will gain a 20% cryo damage bonus thanks to her second passive talent. This is a great talent for either Ganyu or another cryo DPS to utilize. The burst also has amazing uptime thanks to the burst duration and cooldown being the same, while only requiring 60 energy. All of these amazing features allow Ganyu to be played as a strong burst sub DPS. Now for talent prioritization, from here on I will be recommending things for Melt Ganyu and Freeze Ganyu separately, as the two playstyles differ greatly, so naturally certain things are great for one playstyle while being bad for the other. So first, for a DPS Ganyu that will perform Melt, first prioritize her normal attacks, then her skill and burst. For Freeze Ganyu, prioritize her normal attacks, her burst, and you can then level up her skill. The talent priority for a sub DPS Ganyu is first her burst, and then her skill while ignoring her normal attacks. Let's now talk about Ganyu's weapons. For early game players, you can use any of these bows regardless of your Ganyu's build or playstyle. These bows have crit substats while also increasing damage against enemies affected by Hydro or Pyro, so all of these bows are good options. As for late game weapons, I'll speak of Melt Ganyu first. I've tested all of her weapon options and they do vary depending on what artifact set you use, so I'll separate this section between a Melt Ganyu with 4-piece Wanderers and Melt Ganyu with 4 Shimenawa. But generally speaking, any 5-star bow is amazing on Ganyu and will perform very well regardless of how you build DPS Ganyu or what teams you play her in. So weapons like the Amos bow, the Hunter's Path, the Aqua Simulacra, and the Skyward Harp are all great. This is also the case for 4-star craftable bows, this being the Prototype Crescent and the Hamayumi. If you don't have 5-star bows, these are great alternatives that can actually outdamage some 5-star bows with refinements. Anyways, for Melt Ganyu with 4 Wanderers, these are my findings, but I do want to preface that you should take my findings as a general idea of what are the best bows on her, not as a definitive tier list. Everyone's characters are different, so what I find to be the best, it very well may be different for you. These are the results for a Melt Ganyu with 4 Shimenawa. Here the 4-star bows didn't outdamage any 5-star bows, but they were fairly close and still remain as great options. For Freeze Ganyu, I once again tested her weapons with 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. The bow that dealt the most damage was the Aqua Simulacra. This bow outdamaged all the other bows thanks to the very high crit damage the bow has. The Polar Star came in second place. This bow is in a bit of a weird spot since it has a crit rate substat, and Ganyu with 4-piece Blizzard Strayer and the Cryo Resonance already has a very high crit rate. But as long as you don't overcap on crit rate and mix in a normal attack for the attack buff, it's a very good option. Next is a Thundering Pulse. It came out very close to the Polar Star, so I just consider it on par with the Polar Star. After then came the R5 Prototype Crescent, the Skyward Harp, then the Amos Bow, the R1 Crescent, followed by the R5 Hamayumi, then the R1 Hamayumi. Now for sub DPS Ganyu, things are more simple. For a 5-star option, you can use the Elegy of the End. This weapon is great as it has a high base attack while granting a massive amount of energy. This will allow Ganyu to get her burst back quickly, while also increasing her damage if you give her 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. This bow will also increase your party's damage as the bow will increase attack and elemental mastery. The Stringless is also a great option. The elemental mastery substat isn't useful in a freeze team, but its passive is great as it directly increases the damage of Ganyu's burst. The Favonius Warbow is a great option for giving Ganyu her required energy amount while also giving energy to the rest of her team. The huge ER substat once again works great with 4-piece Emblem. The Alley Hunter, Moon's Moon, and Fading Twilight both have high base attacks while increasing damage, so if you want Ganyu's burst to deal high damage, these bows are great options for doing so. Next is a Sacrificial Bow. This bow can decently regenerate her burst as it gives a bit of ER while possibly allowing Ganyu to cast her skill twice. I'd recommend to only use this bow if you're not able to use any of the other bows I mentioned. Lastly, you can use any of the 5-star bows I previously mentioned, but it'd likely be best to give those bows to your main DPS. Now let's delve into Ganyu's artifacts. For early game players, you can use 4-piece Sojourner, 4-piece Martial Artist, or any combination of 2 Sojourner, 2 Berserker, 2 Braveheart, 2 Instructor if Ganyu will be melting, or 2 Martial Artist. For an early game sub DPS Ganyu, you can use 2 Braveheart and 2 Berserker, or 2 Braveheart and 2 Sojourner. Now let's talk about Ganyu's late game artifacts. For a Melt Ganyu, the set that will output the most damage is 4-piece Shimenawa. This set grants 18% attack and a huge 50% charge attack damage bonus. This set is great, but it does have its downsides. For the charge attack buff to occur, Ganyu needs to have more than 15 energy, and if she does, she will lose that 15 energy. In a Melt team, this really isn't a big deal since in most Melt teams, aside from Sunfire Ganyu, it's best to actually not use her burst anyways, since it will steal melts from your charge shots, but even so, you will have to be mindful of her energy and manage it well. 4-piece Wanderers is the next best option to Shimenawa. It deals only 5% less damage, so as long as you have good substats, this set can actually deal more damage than Shimenawa. Wanderers has the benefit of constantly granting its 35% charge attack damage increase. It also gives 80 EM for added reaction damage, and this set does not require or take your energy, so it doesn't restrict you into playing in a certain way. If you're unable to use these two sets, you can then use 4-piece Retracing Bolide. It grants a 40% charge attack damage bonus as long as Ganyu is shielded, which she pretty much should be anyways. For Freeze Ganyu, the best set is 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. It grants cryo damage bonus while providing 40% crit rate if an enemy is frozen. Ganyu's crit rate is further increased by her passive and the cryo resonance. In total, this gives Ganyu 75% crit rate just by equipping this set. It is crazy. With this set, you don't have to worry about crit rate and you can instead focus on stacking as much crit damage and attack percentage on Ganyu. I highly advise to use this set, but if you can't, you can then use any of the sets I mentioned for Mount Ganyu, the best of the 3 being Retracing Bolide. The 80 EM from Wanderer's Troop is useless, and Ganyu's burst is important in a freeze team, so the energy stealing of Shimenawa is not viable. For sub DPS Ganyu, 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate will deal the most damage, since this set turns energy recharge into burst damage, which as a burst DPS, Ganyu will have a lot of. Alternatively, you can give Ganyu 4 Blizzard Strayer. This set is only viable in a freeze team, but it grants so much crit rate that it can actually be better than 4 Emblem, as long as you have enough crit damage and energy recharge. You can also give Ganyu 2 Blizzard Strayer and 2 Noblesse, or 2 Blizzard Strayer and 2 Emblem if you need extra energy. For Ganyu's artifact main stats, if she will be triggering Melt with 4-piece Wanderers, use an attack percentage Sands or an EM Sands. Attack percentage will deal more damage since the 2-piece already gives 80 EM. Use a Cryo Goblet and any of the crits for her circlet. If Ganyu is using 4 Shimenawa or 4 Retracing Bolide, use either an EM or attack percentage Sands. For Shimenawa specifically, EM did outdamage attack percentage, while for Retracing Bolide, EM barely outdamage attack percentage, so you should just use whichever Sands has the best substats. Run a Cryo Damage Goblet and either crits for her circlet. For a Freeze Ganyu, give her attack percentage, a Cryo Goblet, and crit damage as her circlet. Once again, Ganyu will already have a huge amount of crit rate from multiple sources, so it's best to run a crit damage circlet. Lastly, for sub DPS Ganyu, if your bow has energy recharge, use an attack percentage Sands. If it doesn't, you should use energy recharge, and then use a Cryo Goblet and either crits. As for which substats to have on Ganyu, being a DPS she'll want both crits and attack percentage, regardless if she'll be melting or freezing. If she will be melting, aim to also have some elemental mastery. If she won't be melting but rather freezing, instead of EM, aim to have energy recharge. For her total energy amount, aim for around 140 as a main DPS. For sub DPS Ganyu, aim for both crits, attack percentage, and energy recharge. Try to have about 170% energy. Let's talk about which of Ganyu's constellations are the best and the ones you should aim for. Aim for the 4th constellation. This constellation will increase all of your character's damage by 5% every 3 seconds, maxing out at 25%. Then her C6, where after her skill is used for 30 seconds the charging of her Frostflake arrows is completely removed and she can fire them right away. It's a very broken constellation. I'd advise to not get any of her constellations though. She's already a really strong and complete character at C0, so her constellations are a bit unnecessary, especially her C6. It will make her so strong and make enemies so easy and so quickly killed, it makes battles become way too trivial. Now let's cover Ganyu's team comps. The first team is a Geo-supported Melt Ganyu comp. Ganyu will no longer be vulnerable while waiting for her charge shots with Zhongli's shield, so you can calmly and reliably use her charge shots. Ganyu's damage will also be increased by Zhongli's shield and a Geo Resonance. There will also be passive damage thanks to the Geo Traveler or Albedo alongside your charge shots. This team is a simple one that fixes Ganyu's struggles while also adding to her damage. Xiangling will likely struggle with energy in this team, so it'd be best for her and any of the other 2 Geo characters to use a Favonius weapon. A variation of this team is Sunfire Ganyu. In this team, Bennett and Jean will cause enemies to be constantly affected by Pyro. This makes it very easy for Ganyu to melt, and this actually allows her to use her burst and benefit from the 20% cryo damage buff. Normally it's best to not use her burst since it will likely steal melts from her charge shots, but Jean and Bennett apply Pyro so well that her burst and shots can be used to melt. Lastly, Zhongli will shield Ganyu so she won't be interrupted while charging her shots, and his burst's petrification will keep enemies within Jean and Bennett's burst so they can continue to be affected by Pyro. The next team is a freeze team I like to call the Staples button, since after every fight you'll say that was easy. In this team, Ayato and Ganyu will perma-freeze enemies with their bursts, and Venti will group all the enemies tightly together, reducing their resistances to Hydro and Cryo. Ganyu's and Ayato's burst will deal near constant damage to all enemies, and Ganyu's charge shots will do the same. This team is a very satisfying team that's very broken when facing multiple small enemies. The last team is another perma-freeze team, but this time Ganyu acts as a sub DPS and Ayaka as the main. Just as the last team, Ayato and Ganyu will freeze enemies, Kazuha will group enemies together and add to the already great passive damage occurring with his burst. Ayaka will be buffed by Kazuha and Ganyu's cryo damage passive. When all enemies are frozen and grouped together, you can use Ayaka's burst to erase enemies in an instant. This team is amazing for Ayaka and can be used in all combat situations. It's a fun team while being really strong, so I highly recommend to use this team. And that is everything. I hope you enjoyed and gained from my guide on Ganyu. She's a very broken character that can easily carry you in Genshin as long as her weaknesses can be solved, which is a very easy thing to do. She's not just restricted into using her great charge shots, she can also act as a very good sub DPS, so she's a really good addition to anyone's account. With that being said, I'm going to end the video. If any of you do have questions on Ganyu, feel free to ask. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you all very much for watching, and take care.